Ella Cole stood at the edge of the range, her boots pressed firm into the dusty ground, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows behind her as if her doubts were following closely. A line of men, mostly in uniform, had gathered behind the bench. Their voices low, their glances quick and dismissive. She heard the phrase again, "Step aside, little lady," and this time it came with a chuckle and a hand motion that waved her off like she was just a breeze. In the way she didn't flinch. Instead, she lowered her gaze, not in submission, but in silence, a silence she had worn like armor since her first day. Herethi range itself was quiet except for the soft ping of bullets striking metal somewhere downfield and the occasional click of safety catches snapping open. It smelled like warm brass oil and the kind of tension that only comes when people are watching and not expecting much. Her rifle was old second-hand, the stock nicked in places and the barrel showing its age, but she had cleaned it. The way her grandfather taught her, slow, deliberate, careful, the way you treat a tool you trust with your life. She laid the rifle down, checked her sights, not because she needed to, but because it gave her something to do. Her fingers steady her breath. Even she had been here before, not this exact moment, but the kind like it, when people told her no, when they laughed, when they stepped in front of her without even thinking. It counted the same each time. Behind her, one of the men leaned toward another. She caught the words, just barely. "Watch this, gonna be a jockish," adjusted her position, rested her cheek against the stock and lined up her sights. She could feel her heartbeat, not in panic, but in rhythm like a drum, sensing her body to the earth. And in that moment the world narrowed, the noise behind her fell away, the doubt, the whispers, the laughter, everything slipped off the edge of her focus. Remembered her grandfather, his voice steady as stone. "Your eye sees, your breath speaks, and your hand listens." He used to say it when she was 10, learning to shoot soda cans off fence posts in the fields behind his farmhouse. Back then she missed more than she hit, but he never said she couldn't, he only said, "Try again." Oh, she breathed in slow, the kind of breath that fills you with something uncheckable, and then she exhaled, let her finger ease back just enough, no more, no less. Crack of the shot rolled over the field, sharp, sudden, unmistakable, a ripple in the air that turned. A few head silence followed, the kind that holds its breath before it knows what just happened. She didn't move, not yet. She was waiting for something. The screen at the far end of the range began to flicker, numbers adjusting, recalibrating, recalculating, like it was trying to understand what had just passed through its sensor sand. Then someone whispered again, but this time it wasn't "step aside," it was something closer. Toted. She just silence lingered a few seconds longer than it should have, stretched tight and trembling like a wire pulled too far. Ella stood motionless, her eyes still on the screen across the range, her breath held as if even releasing air would disturb whatever had just been set in motion. Behind her, boots scuffed as someone shifted uncomfortably, their bravado peeling away bit by bit with every second of quiet that followed. The softened, the monitor blinked, fully awake, the numbers on the digital panel stabilized, and someone let out a half gasp, half curse under their breath, not because she had hit the target, but because she had hit it perfectly dead center, not just once, but with a grouping so tight the system had to rerun the calculation a second time to be serene. Nobody spoke yet, but the energy had changed. A few of the men had started drifting closer, peering at the monitor, squinting like maybe they had misread it, but the numbers held steady, cold, hard, undeniable. Ella finally stood, brushed dust from her jeans, and slung her rifle over her shoulder. Without a word, she walked back slowly past them, the same men who told her to step aside, and this time no one made a sound, no one laughed, no one dared meet her eyes except one, a younger guy, barely 20, maybe the only one who hadn't said anything. When the others dismissed her, he gave her a small nod, not of surprise, but of respect, like he knew a storm when he saw one coming. By the time she reached the small gear station at the back, the range officer had stepped out from his booth, clipboard in hand, eyebrows raised high enough to vanish under the brim of his cap. He didn't speak right away, just checked the screen again, tapped a few buttons, looked at her, then back to the screen. "Mom," he said, though it sounded more like a question than a greeting. That grouping registered at point 20 inches, tightest we've seen in over a decade. He looked at her rifle, then at her again. "This thing, your Ella," gave a single nod, kept her words tucked inside where they belonged. The officer looked like he had more to say but couldn't find the shape of the sentence. Word was already spreading. A few of the regulars had pulled out phones, quietly snapping shots of the target readout, some already whispering it through their group chat. Someone muttered her name like it was being tried on for the first time, and others repeated it slowly, carefully. Ella Cole's range was no longer just a practice ground. It had become something else, a place where something unexpected had happened, and no one quite knew what to do with it. Some looked uncomfortable, some looked impressed, but all of them remembered the moment she was told to step aside and the way she answered, not with protest, not with anger, but with precision. Sat at the edge of the bench, cleaned her rifle again like nothing extraordinary had just happened, because for her it hadn't done what she came to know. They had to figure out what it means. Next morning the air at the range felt different, not cooler, not quieter, just charged in that invisible way people feel before something breaks open. The same men were there again, lined up like usual, but this time their eyes drifted to the far bench before they even began warming up. The spot where Ella had stood yesterday, the spot nobody had cared about until a single shot changed everything. Ella arrived later than usual, not because she was trying to make a point, but because she had been up all night oiling the old rifle, checking the bolt action twice, even though she knew it was fine, part habit, part ritual, part something deeper she couldn't name. Her grandfather used to call it respect for the tools, and for the moment when she stepped onto the gravel, every conversation stopped just for a second, then started again, to loud, to fast, like they were all trying not to notice her, and yet she knew they did not just notice her, they were watching now, watching her like she belonged, and yet still unsure of how this time she didn't go straight to the bench. She walked toward the main board where names were ranked, where scores and records were logged. A paper copy still pinned with a red thumbtack fluttered slightly in the breeze. Her name was there now, not at the bottom, not tucked away in the unofficial columns, but at the very top, written in block letters, Ella Cole, with a mark beside it, a note that read under review, official, pending confirmation. That note was what got them talking again. Some said it was luck, others whispered about a glitch in the system. Someone even joked that maybe the target sensors had dust in them. Ella said nothing. She just picked her lanes, set up her gear, and got ready again. The officer was watching this time, clipboard in hand, but no longer surprised. Now he was curious, the kind of curiosity that comes from knowing you just saw something rare and maybe even historic and not being sure what to do with it. She adjusted her stance. Someone 2 lanes over called out real casual, try and do it again. Bet you can't twice. It wasn't cruel exactly, but it wasn't kind either. She looked up briefly, met his eyes, not with challenge, just calm, then returned to her sightline. The same rhythm, the same breath, the same slow, deliberate patience that had unnerved them all yesterday. Her finger eased back, and the shot cracked through the still air like a door slamming shut. This time no one waited for the screen to load. They turned immediately, eyes fixed on the monitor that again took a moment to catch up, as if even it couldn't quite believe her consistent eye. Result blinked into view, almost identical to the day before. Silence again. Same man who had called out before now stared at the screen, then at her, and finally looked down like maybe he'd just asked the wrong question to the wrong person. Ella simply reloaded her rifle, adjusted her grip, and prepared for another shot, not because she had anything to prove, but because this was what she died in. Now they all knew it. The following days brought more people to the range than usual. Some were regulars, curious to see if the talk was true. Others were strangers, new faces with crossed arms and skeptical eyes. There were whispers in the local forums. Someone had posted a photo of the leaderboard. Others had shared a short video clip, just the monitor flickering, and then the name Ella Cole in bright, sharp letters. The post simply said, "Who is she?" Ella didn't change her routine. She showed up late afternoons, same worn boots, same quiet presence, her rifle always clean, always ready. She didn't talk unless someone spoke first, and even then her replies were short, polite, firm, the kind of quiet that made people lean in to hear, not because she was soft, but because she was steady. Some of the men had stopped trying to make jokes around her. They watched now from the corners of their eyes. Some nodded at her like equals, like veterans of something they couldn't name. Others still held their distance, but even That had changed. It wasn't dismissal anymore, it was caution, curiosity, maybe even respect. She kept shooting every day, not to break records, not to prove anyone wrong, but because shooting was her calm. The range was where the noise in her head stilled, where the world narrowed into breath and steel and silence, where there was no room for memory, no space for the things she didn't speak about. Tony afternoon. A reporter came, not from a major outlet, but a local rag, the kind that usually covered fishing tournaments and town council meetings. He was young, wore a denim jacket, and carried a camera that looked too expensive for his beat. He asked for an interview. She declined politely, told him she was just here to practice, not interested in being a story. Stayed anyway, watched her through the safety line, took notes in a small pad. When he thought she wasn't looking, he asked the range officer a few questions and left before sunset, his eyes still wide, like maybe he had seen something more than he expected. That night the article went live, small headline in a small paper, but it spread fast. The girl with the iron focus, they called her, said she was a mystery wrapped in precision, said her hands moved like clockwork and her shots cut through doubt like wind through wheat fields. It was a good piece, respectful, a little poetic, and filled with wonder. The next morning someone brought her coffee, said nothing, just set it down on the bench next to her gear and walked away. She didn't drink it, but she left it there like a marker, like something had shifted. The officer posted the final confirmation on the board. The review was complete. Her record was official. The red thumbtack was gone, replaced with gold ink and clean type. Somewhere in town, a local sporting goods shop hung her photo in the window. What the range? She simply loaded her rifle again, eyes on the distance, heart steady, hands quiet. She was not there for applause. She was there for the shot. Crowd at the range grew each week, but Ella barely noticed them. Her focus never wavered, not when the cameras showed up, not when the whispers got louder, not even when a National Shooting League rep started showing up just to watch in silence from the far end of the fence line. She kept her head down, her hands steady, her breathing deep, each shot as deliberate as the last. But even perfect control cannot keep the past away forever. It started with a man in a suit, not military, not press, but something in between. He waited for her near the parking lot, tall with dark glasses and a government kind of stillness. He said he represented a training program, one with big names and bigger stakes, and they had seen her numbers and wanted to talk. She said no the first time, and the second came back a third time with a folder in hand and a name that froze her halfway into a breather. Brother. She hadn't spoken that word in 2 years, not since the day the call came, not since the uniformed woman had removed her hat and said, "We regret to inform you." Ella took the folder slowly, as if it might burn her, opened it with fingers that had never trembled before, and read the words that cracked the calm she had built like stone around her heart. Your brother was part of a covert trial. His final mission was never logged publicly. There were inconsistencies in the record, the full truth never released, but his last request on record was for your protection. The man in the suit said, "We believe he taught you everything he knew and that you might be the key to understanding what happened to him." Ella didn't answer, didn't move, didn't breath. At night she didn't go home. She drove for hours across state lines until the road became dirt and the sky was filled with stars she hadn't seen in years. She parked near a field, walked until her boots were covered in dew, and sat in the grass, rifle across her lap like it had always belonged there. She remembered the days her brother taught her how to hold a rifle, how to listen to the wind, how to know when to wait and when to move. He had said shooting was not just about accuracy, it was about listening, about truth. In that moment she realized the range had never been the end, it was only the beginning. The next morning she returned early, before the sun had risen, before anyone else arrived. She set up her gear and began to shoot, not for the record, not for the crowd, but to remember, to reach through memory with action, to connect the woman she was now to the little girl her brother had believed in. When the officer arrived and saw her already halfway through a box of rounds, he said, "You're here early." She looked at the target, her eyes unreadable, and said, "I've got more work too." The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the range as Ella stood steady, her eyes fixed on the distant target, the rifle balanced in her hands like an extension of herself, not just a tool, but a promise, a memory, a future waiting to unfold around her. The crowd was silent, the usual chatter replaced by a reverent hush. Even the birds seemed to pause, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was about to come. This was no longer just about a record or a challenge. It was about something deeper, something unspoken that had been growing with every shot, every breath, every moment of quiet determination. She thought of her brother, his voice echoing in her mind, the lessons he had given her, not just about aiming, but about life, about resilience, about finding strength when everything else tries to tear you down. The officer watched from the side, clipboard forgotten, his eyes reflecting the rare kind of respect born only from witnessing something extraordinary. Took a slow breath and settled into her stance, the weight of the rifle familiar and steady, her finger poised to release the final shot that had already been rehearsed 1,000 times. In the silence of her mind, she exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The sharp crack broke the stillness, and the bullet flew swift and truth monitor flickered to life, the numbers rising and settling, then shining brighter than any before, a grouping so tight it defied belief, the smallest measurement recorded on that range ever. The crowd erupted, but Ella did not move. Her gaze remained locked on the target, her heart steady, her mind clearing. That moment, the whispers of doubt were gone, replaced by something new, a recognition, not just of skill, but of spirit, a reminder that sometimes the quietest voices make the loudest impact. The sun dipped below the horizon. Ella packed her rifle carefully, her movements slow, deliberate, as if sealing the moment away for safekeeping. She walked away from the range that evening, not as the woman who had been told to step aside, but as the one who had rewritten what was possibly somewhere deep inside. She knew this was only the beginning of a story much larger than a single shot, much larger than a record, a story about courage, about persistence, and about the power to rise even when no one believes you can.